introduction to Photoshop. This is week 3. Everyone did really good on the assignment. So I put this slide in before I started grading any of your work. Looks like everyone really understood about making selections. There's a few little problems with some of the edges, but I'm going to show you a different tool that we'll use for making selections that is actually fairly new. But before we get started on that, did anyone have any questions about the assignment?
It's such that once I moved it around, it was like a separate object. And I noticed that once I deselected it or selected something else, I couldn't go back and get that moved around. I would have had to reselect it. Is that a correct observation, or am I missing something?
You are not missing something. You're getting the point of today's class. So yes, that is a limitation of making a selection and using that keyboard shortcut to move it. That actually just moves the pixels on that background layer. It doesn't let it float any longer than once you've let go of the selection. Once you've let go of the selection, it replaces whatever pixels it was covering. So that is how that assignment works. However, the new way, by using layers, you can reposition it once and then reposition it a week later. It'll cover the pixels, but once you move it, it'll uncover the pixels below it. So you don't have to, start from scratch. So that'll make more sense when we go through what we're going to work on today, because that seems to be, the way that makes the most sense. And like I said at the beginning of the class, I want everyone to be using the 21st century tools in Photoshop, and layers was introduced in 1994. So here is one of the other things I noticed was that on one of the, I think it was a gourd. A lot of people use the gourd for the nose. A lot of people had a white fringe around that, and that's probably, it would depend on which selection tool you used. I tried making it with a magnetic lasso and with the magic wand. Both of them had a little bit of a halo around them. What I recommend you do, if that is what you're seeing, is make the selection and then just contract it by a pixel or two. And so you just go to the select menu, choose modify, and then contract. And then you can enter 1 or 2 pixels. That usually takes care of the problem. With more intricate selections, that doesn't work. And we'll show another method of doing that later. Now, there is one tool that I had you click on and then choose another tool. So what is the object selection tool? It is really new. This is introduced in 2020, and it looks like that, little square box with an arrow in it. And it operates in 3 different ways. You can single click on an object in your image, and it'll try to figure out the selection for that. You can draw an initial rectangle selection, and that'll limit it to that area. Sometimes you have to do that. Or you can get more precise by drawing a lasso selection around it. And I'll show you how all of those works. Honestly, this tool should be your first choice. So let's go into Photoshop. And I have a new file for you in the module 3. It's the layers melon head. And it is a different file than just the melon head. So I put something sneaky in there. I hope it's amusing to everyone. We'll just open that up. Okay, so this should look familiar. Let's explore this tool. So first, let's choose this object selection tool. So if you have the magic wand tool showing, you just click, hold, and then drag it to object selection tool. And let's start with the kiwi. Just a single click, and that's a perfect selection. How about the mushroom? Yep, works great. The radish. Remember how we had to use 2 different tools to get that. On this one, you just click once and it's selected. Now, what about on this one? We're not selecting the whole grapefruit. We just want the center of it. So if I click on this, it actually makes a funny selection. It's just selecting the Rhine, which is, no, we don't want that. But that's fine. We can change that. All you need to do is, and one thing I think I didn't mention is you can, if you find it hasn't made a selection you want, just click anywhere else and it'll deselect. So make sure that the mode in the options panel is set to rectangle. And let's just draw a rectangle around the fruit of that. Yeah, it just makes a perfect selection. Obviously, it's going to do a good job with the carrot, blueberry. And how about this pear tomato? And you'll see kind of where some of the limitations of this are. Well, it got most of it, but also get the shadow. So for this one, we can try the lasso tool. So I'll change it from rectangle to lasso, and I'll just draw a rough selection around that fruit, or I guess it's a fruit technically. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so now here's the killer. We can use, let's see how this does on this one. So first I'll just try to select it by clicking on it. And yeah, it's selected the shadow as well. Maybe if I draw it with the lasso tool, let's try that. Just doing a loose selection around there and then trying not to get into the shadow area. Nope, still selecting the shadow. So what is the way to make this selection? We could go through laboriously with the lasso tool and changing it to the polygonal lasso tool, but there is a much easier, faster, and better way to do it. If you notice in the layers panel, there is a layer above background called other background. If you click just to the left of that thumbnail image, that'll turn on the eyeball for that layer. And you'll notice something. I went to the Adobe stock website and found an image of the bow tie pasta on just a white background. I was amazed that it was just so easy to find. So let's see if that selects well just by clicking. And another thing, make sure that you have the layer selected that you want to select from. That seems like it should be obvious, but I make the mistake of not having the layer actually selected, and it confuses me sometimes when it looks like, I'm not selecting what I want to. So we have the other background selected in the layers panel, and just a single click makes another perfect selection. This is the object selection tool. One of the limitations of working on one layer and moving the pixels on that single layer is, as Jesse Owens said, one chance is all you need. Now, Jesse Owens was a genius and a wonderful athlete. He won 4 gold medals at the 1936 Olympic Games. Most of us are not Olympic star athletes, but we can be inspired by them. But maybe one chance is less than what you need. So, and also, what if you made the right choice, but then the client says, oh, we want to fix that? Going back later is a nice thing to be able to do. So we're going to find out how to add some forgiveness to Photoshop, so that makes it easier and we don't have to start from scratch. As I said, I began working as a desktop publisher at Kinko's in 1994. At that time, we had Photoshop 2.5. In September of that year, we received an upgrade for all of our computers. So we actually rented out computers for people that didn't have the software for desktop design. We also provided design services. So we would design it for them, or if they wanted to, they could get on our computers and they could, use Adobe Photoshop and PageMaker. So we received an update, and it included Photoshop 3.0. And it had one killer feature that everyone in the store was excited about. For the first time, you could create composite images easily and non-destructively. If you didn't like the size or position of any object, you could just select the layer is on and fix it, even the next day. No more relying on undo to get back to the step to get you out of a pinch. So better living through layers. So what is a layer? Well, images start as just a flat image. And then you make a selection. Once you've made that selection, rather than moving it by copying and pasting pixels, you can put it on its own layer by pressing Command or Control J. J, because that's the closest letter to L. Maybe it's because whoever designed it was dyslexic and he thought the J looked like an L. Anyway, actually, I think it's because L usually stands for left justify. So it's like, okay, what's the next letter we can use? So that is one that most Photoshop users will know. When you make a selection, you go to Control J or Command J to lift it and put it on its own layer. And then, most importantly, you name the layer. Some of the layers can be small. So when you create objects like this, and let's go back into Photoshop, I'll show you what I mean. So let's go through and make some selections of this. So we'll start with the kiwi. I'll click on that with the object selection tool, and I'm pressing Command J because I'm on the Mac. And then likewise, I'll select the other background again because I wanted to select this mushroom.
A layer.
Command J.
A layer.
And then I have these two little, things over here that say layer 1 and layer 2. And, foolishly, I forgot to label them. And looking at the thumbnail, that doesn't give me any idea what's actually in there. So I'm lost. I don't have to be lost, though. I can be saved. So let's just go to the hamburger menu from the layers manual. And then there's this option here
A layer.
for panel options.
A layer.
And right here, we can change the thumbnail size. So then that'll give us bigger thumbnails. And also, I'd recommend that you change this setting, thumbnail contents. Right now, it's just showing us the entire document as the thumbnail, which, that's not really useful because a lot of times almost all the time, if you have something on a layer by itself, it's something smaller than the entire document. So why don't we change this to layer bounds?
A layer.
So we'll click that and let's see if that changes anything in our layers pal.
A layer.
Oh, now all of a sudden I can see. So this is great. So yeah, let's name that kiwi.
A layer.
And mushroom. Okay. And then we'll go through and make a few other selections. And
a layer. A layer. A layer.
Okay. Grapefruit. And then let's see.
A layer. A layer. A layer.
Radish.
A layer. A layer. A layer. A layer. A layer. A layer. A layer.
Carrot.
A layer. A layer. A layer. A layer.
We got the carrot. Let's do the blueberry. Okay, we already did that. Blueberry. That rectangle. Okay, and if you see this, couldn't find an object to select, that's because I have not changed to the other background. So need to make sure that I'm on the background that I want to select from. Okay, and Command J. I'm just going to call it a pear, although it's a pear tomato, whatever. All right, and then a little pasta. And one change I'll make is I'm actually going to put our melon on its own layer, and you'll see why. So Command J, and we'll call this the melon. All right. And so now this is where we begin what we'll learn for this week's assignment, which is about positioning layers. So once you have objects that we want to work with, you can turn off the background. Yep. And then to make it easy to work, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a solid color underneath all of our objects. All right. So a layer can have things other than pixels on them. And this is our first kind of example of a different thing you can have in a layer. If you go to this little yin and the yang and click on that, there's all sorts of options. These are effects that you can apply, or in this case, we want a solid color to fill the entire layer. So I chose that one, and then I can select a color, a layer, and then just like any other layer, I can change the stacking order, which means things on the bottom will be on the bottom, things on the top will cover things up. So if I move this to the top of the stacking order, everything's gone. Okay. So let's move it to the bottom where it belongs. If you look over here in the layers palette at the top, there's some icons and it says kind, or you can change it to name. And for instance, if I wanted to find just the layers named pasta, and then that limits what is displayed in the layers palette. In most cases, you won't use this, so just leave it on kind, and then make sure none of these are selected. If you select one of these, it's only going to show that type of object. So if I click on the little yin and yang, that's just going to show me all the adjustment layers, which I currently don't have one, apparently. Okay. So we now have that properly positioned. And I'm going to choose the move tool. And if you notice up in my my panel up here, it's set to auto select. That might that'll cause us problems later, and I'll show you why. But for now, let's move the blueberry on top of the carrot, and we run into our first problem. The blueberry is now behind the carrot. So we can fix that by moving it up in the layer stack. And there we go. And once you have it almost in position, sometimes you'll be off by a pixel. I generally recommend just leave the move tool selected, and you can use the arrow keys on your computer keyboard to make a more precise move. Now at this stage, as you remember, we want to have the eye stay together. So we can use a feature of Photoshop where we can group layers. So you just select both layers, and then it's Command G or Control G on Windows. And we can call that eye. Okay, so we have one eye, and whoops, what happens? Oh no, that's not good. So what happens when I have auto select selected is it's going to select whichever object my mouse is under. And in this case, it created a problem for me because I actually want to select both of these together. Now, the way to do that instead is to select the layer group I, and then make sure auto select is not selected. And now it moves together. Perfect. All right. And to duplicate that, I pressed Shift and Alt or Option. And that makes another folder for us with both the eye and the carrot in it. All right. So we have two eyes. What's next? Probably a nose. So we'll go back to auto select, and I'm just going to move this over. And let's put his little tie on. And let's give him some eyebrows. And then I'll do the Alt option. And we will flip that layer. And you'll notice I'm not making any selections. I'm just clicking on things and dragging them over with the move tool. I don't have to select them again once they're on their own layer. Okay, so whoops, got that eyebrow in place. So I got the nose, the eyes, and the eyebrows in place. Oh, you know what? We forgot to put the mouth on there. So that could be a problem. He's got to eat. So yeah, we'll put that on there. A layer. And you'll notice these little pink lines show up. Those are aligning it to other things. So for instance, if I wanted this centered, I just look for that line that says, oh, you're in the center now. And it's actually centering it on the melon. It tries to figure out the different relationships. So with a grapefruit, we just move it over. A layer. Then this is the one we had to transform. So Command or Control T. And then I just position my mouse outside. And then I can rotate. A layer. And then I'm holding Shift and it limits the degrees it rotates it by. So 90 degrees exactly. So got that. A layer. And then I put that in place. And we were going to resize this. This ear is too big. A layer. So we want to make it smaller, right? Okay, so I'll make this smaller. A layer. And someone's supposed to tell me, oh no, Marty, that's too small. Oh no. Oh, I'm going to have to change that. Oh, how awful. Okay, so I'll just press Command T again once it's tiny like this. And then I'm going to enlargenate it. And you see our first problem here. A layer. That is not sharp. That is a terrible layer. This is a problem with compositing images. However, there is a solution for it. So let's just Command Z to go back a few steps before I made my terrible mistake. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to right click on this grapefruit layer, and I'm going to convert it to a smart object. A layer. And this is a step that we'll do in our assignment for this week. We'll make smart objects of things to make it easier on ourselves, because we'll be resizing images as well as positioning them. What a smart object is, it's basically, it acts as a container. A layer. So right here we have in the layers panel, you notice it has this little icon. A layer. And that's to show you that this is a smart object. And so if I tried to paint on this object, it gives me this little, nope, can't do that. And if I try to paint, it says the smart object must be rasterized before proceeding. I don't want to do that. Okay, cancel. A layer. So here, let's see if this fixed our problem. So once again, I will free transform that. I'll rotate it 90 degrees, and then I will accidentally make it too small. A layer. I'll commit to the transform. A layer. And then I'll do, to back out of that problem, I'll transform again. A layer. And we'll bring it back to size. A layer. And then I'll press return. It's nice and sharp. What kind of magic, what kind of sorcery is this? This is how a smart object works. Smart object, like I said, is like it's a container. How do I get inside that container? So what if I wanted to edit the pixels? All I need to do is double click on the icon here, and it'll open up our smart object in a new window. And as you see, our smart object is not transformed. It's not rotated 90 degrees. It's exactly what we started out with. A layer. So for instance, maybe I wanted to lighten this up. I could put an adjustment layer, which is another kind of layer we'll study in the next 2 weeks. But for right now, if we wanted to brighten something up, I'll just go to brightness contrast. A layer. And then I can change the brightness on this to make it brighter. A layer. Okay, and that looks good to me. So I'll just close that. And this is actually saving it inside our Photoshop document. It's not saving it somewhere on your hard drive that you need to remember. It's all inside the same file.
A layer.
And there we have it. So we have our bright piece of melon that's a little too big. So I'll resize it again.
A layer.
And then, whoops.
A layer.
We'll commit to that. And actually, this should be below his head, shouldn't it? Because his ears are on top of his head. We don't want that. So let's move this down, the layer stack.
A layer. Oh,
and I actually don't. So if panels are getting in the way, you can just double click on the name of the panel and that'll collapse it temporarily for you. Okay, so now it's following the curvature of the melon for his head, and the ear is behind that. I'll just Shift, Alt, or Option, with the Move tool. That'll make a copy for us. And then I'll transform that, edit, transform. And flip horizontal. All right, and just move that into place. Alrighty. And if you remember on this mushroom, we had to make a fancy selection where we have a little curve in the stem of the mushroom so that it fits on his head. What we really need to do is just move the mushroom behind the melon. So I'm just going to grab it from my layers panel and move it below the melon. And then when I move that into place, there we go. That was tons faster. I hope you see. And also it allowed us to have some flexibility by using smart objects where we could resize something and it was not a permanent change. We could resize it, make a mistake, and come back later and fix it. So this is the basics of using layers. So just to review, we start with the flat image. We make a selection. We put it on its own layer with Control or Command J, and then we name the layer. And we also found out about stacking order, which is in the layers panel, that is the stacking order. So the background is the very bottom, and it's also never transparent. There's only one layer that will never have any transparency. However, you don't actually have to have a background layer, and I'll show you how to get rid of that if you want to. Any other layer can have variable transparency, and also the pixels of one layer can interact with others in magical ways. We'll find about different blending modes in the next few weeks. And we also learned about smart objects. These act as a proxy for the image. Transformations will only affect the proxy, not the original pixels, and they're a non-destructive way to do transformations. Remember when we made it too small and then we enlarged it? The original pixels were still there, so we didn't get those blurry pixels when we bumped it back up to size. And we learned how to edit a smart object. You just double-click on it, and the isolated smart object will appear. You can edit the image however you want, and then you just close it, and it'll ask you if you want to save, and you do. And